A drill instructor mocked a woman. Then he saw her tattoo and went still. You are too weak to be here. This is a Marine Corps parade deck, not a parking lot for lost mothers. Turn around and walk back to the bleachers before I have you walked. The voice cracked across the asphalt at 8:40 in the morning. It was loud enough that 2 squads of new Marines heard it through the heat shimmer and pretended they had not. Marine Corps Recruit Depot. Family Day. 300 recruits forming for graduation. Rifles oiled, covers squared. The smell of cut grass and rifle solvent thick in the June air. Buses idling. Bleachers filling with mothers and fathers. And little brothers in stiff new shirts. And one woman standing alone at the edge of the deck where she was not supposed to be. She was 42. A plain gray jacket, dark pants, and running shoes worn soft. No purse and no phone in her hand. No rank, no name tape, nothing on her at all that told a story. To Staff Sergeant Cole Brackett, marching toward her with his campaign cover pulled low over his eyes. She was exactly what the morning kept producing. A parent who had drifted off the visitor path and onto his ground. She did not flinch when he stopped 2 feet from her face. Understood, Staff Sergeant, she said. 2 words, flat and even. But she did not move toward the bleachers. Her eyes finished what they had started before he ever opened his mouth. They crossed the deck once, the squad bay hatches, the duty hut, and the formation, the gaps between the formed squads, and the lane the buses used, the place where a vehicle would stop if a vehicle came. Then they came back to him, unhurried. Done. She stood the way water stands behind a dam, still and heavy and going nowhere. It was not told to go. Brackett read the stillness as defiance. Men like Brackett always did. He stepped in closer and dropped his voice into the register he used on recruits who locked their knees. He let the 2 junior drill instructors near him hear every word. You do not belong anywhere near my Marines, he said. You see this? He swept a gloved hand at the formation behind him. 300 of the meanest and hardest things this country makes. And they made them right here on this deck, and they made them right here on this deck while people like you were home in the air conditioning. So I'm going to ask you one time, ma'am, real slow, so it lands. What makes you think you get to stand on it? She watched him the way a person watches weather. Her weight rode the balls of her feet. Her hands hung open and quiet, at her sides with fingers loose, not a single fidget in them. On her left wrist, a cheap field watch sat with its face turned inward against the pulse. The way a person wears it when they do not want the glass catching light at the wrong moment. She did not answer the question. She did not give him anything to push against. From the squad bay hatch 40 feet away, Master Gunnery Sergeant and Sheets, Master Gunnery Sergeant Desmond Vales, watched the whole thing and said nothing. Vales had been a drill instructor longer than Brackett had been a Marine. Came off the concrete in Sheets. He had been other things before that, in other places. And the doing of those things had taught him to read people fast and from a distance. Came off the concrete in Sheets. He looked at the woman at the edge of the deck, and something in the back of his neck went tight. She was not standing like a nervous civilian. A nervous civilian shifts, clutches, looks for the exit, and wraps her own arms around herself. This woman had found her parade rest the second she stopped walking, and she had not adjusted it since. Heels together, spine stacked, chin level. The posture of someone who had stood it 10,000 times, in worse heat than this, and had stopped feeling it. Now, where did a lost mother learn to stand like that? Vales murmured to no one. Brackett turned his back on her to grin at his hats. He said something low that made one of them snort. He was already telling the story. He was already shaping. He was already shaping the morning into a thing that had gone the way he wanted. A strong Marine putting a soft civilian back in her lane. Behind him, the woman he had called too weak to be there had not taken a single step toward the bleachers. She had not taken a single step at all. She was watching the formation where a recruit, 3 rows back, had begun very slightly to sway. The recruit was 19. The heat came off the concrete in sheets, and he had locked his knees the way every recruit eventually locks his knees. The heat had been climbing since 7 in the morning. His body was about to make a decision. His pride could not stop. His face had gone the color of old paper. The junior hat nearest him was looking the wrong way while watching Brackett show off. The woman saw it 30 seconds before it happened. She had already started moving when the recruit rolled his eyes white. Sheets. She crossed 8 meters of asphalt without seeming to hurry and caught him under the arms as his knees gave out. She turned his head as he went down so his face would not meet the deck. She lowered him flat and knelt, 2 fingers to the side of his throat. The other hand was already lifting his boots up onto her own knee to run the blood back where it was needed. Heat casualty, she said to the junior hat, who was now scrambling over. Pulse 120. He will be back in 90 seconds. Get him water, not a stretcher. Loosen his collar. Nobody carries him anywhere. The hat obeyed before he thought about why he was obeying. So did the recruit beside him, peeling the canteen off Kibenta's own belt. The orders were clipped and flat and certain. And certainty travels faster than rank when a body is on the ground. She did not hurry. People who hurry have not done it enough times. She had done it enough times. You locked your knees, she told the recruit. Quiet just for him. Everybody does once. You bend them now. Soft bend. You stay in the fight. It was the first full sentence she had spoken all morning. And it was not for Brackett, and it was not for Brackett. It was a snot about herself. It was a small correction pass to a frightened 19-year-old, passed by someone who had spent a career keeping frightened young people. Upright. The concrete in sheets. The recruit nodded against her hand and something in his chest unclenched. He filed that voice away in the place where Marines keep the things that save them. The recruit came back exactly when she said he would, on her count. He blinked up at a stranger with a calm face. She kept 2 fingers on his pulse until the number was where she wanted it. Then she eased his boots down and rocked back on her heels. Vales had come closer without deciding to. He watched her hands. There was no wasted motion anywhere in them. Everything she did once, and it had worked the first time. He had seen those hands before on other people, in places that did not have bleachers. Brackett arrived in a fury that he was a half-minute too late for his own deck. Get away from him. He shouldered the recruit squad leader aside. You do not touch my recruits. You do not touch anything out here. That kid is United States Marine Corps property, and you are a trespasser. I had it handled. He is fine now, she said. 3 words. She stood, stepped back to the edge of the deck, and her hands went open and quiet again at her sides. The stillness came back over her like water. Closing, the recruit sat up under his own power with his color returning. He looked at her and not at Brackett. Brackett did not like that. He filed it. Some men learn when they are embarrassed. Other men go looking for someone to make pay for the embarrassment. Brackett was the second kind, and he had already chosen who. As she straightened, the cuff of her gray jacket slid 2 inches up her right forearm. Vales caught it from 6 feet away, the edge of a tattoo, faded blue and black and old, the pommel and an inch of blade, a dagger. Beneath it was the top curve of a number. Then her arm dropped, and the cuff fell back over it, and the morning swallowed it again. But Vales had seen it, and his eyes narrowed. The tightness in the back of his neck became something with a name he did not yet want to say out loud. Brackett. Brackett, meanwhile, had decided how the rest of the morning was going to go. He rallied his junior hats into a loose wall around the woman, 3 campaign covers, and a wide stance. He turned her into the joke the deck needed before a graduation. Gather around, he told them. Loud and performative, pitched for the bleachers within earshot. Teaching point. This is what soft looks like. This right here. Civilian wanders onto a parade deck, puts her hands on a recruit, and decides she is somebody. The world out there will let you believe that about yourself. Out here, we do not. He half turned to her. You felt important just now, holding that kid's head. That feeling, that is the softest thing on this field. 2 of the hats laughed on cue. He keyed the radio clipped at his shoulder and made a show of it. Post 1, this is Staff Sergeant Brackett, on the parade deck. I have got an unauthorized civilian female, interfering with graduation, requesting a guard escort to remove her from the area. He let go of the key and smiled at her. They will walk you out nice and slow, plenty of time for everybody to watch. Then he reached out with one gloved finger and flicked the cuff of her jacket back. He exposed the dagger on her forearm, and he laughed. Cute, big, tough dagger. He flicked the cuff again, lazy and contemptuous. They sell those, down, at the boardwalk, right next to the henna and the airbrush shirts. What is it supposed to make us think? Huh? That you are hard? That you have been somewhere? She wore nothing else. No rings, no chain at her throat, no earrings, and nothing that caught the sun. Her face did not change by the width of a hair. Hair. She did not argue. She did the thing she had been trained over 24 years to do instead of arguing. She read name tapes. She clocked the radio frequency he had used and the time he had used it. She marked the 2 hats, who had laughed and the one who had not. Sheets noted the dark sedan that had just turned into the battalion parking lot. And she noted the field grade officer sticker on its bumper. She filed all of it clean, and ordered in a place built for exactly this. She was not collecting insults. She was collecting facts. The 2 look the same right up until they do not. In the 3rd row of the bleachers, the gray-haired man in the faded unit ball cap had stopped watching his own grandson's squad. He was watching her. He had seen the way she went to the ground for the heat casualty, and the way she stood when she came back up. Something about the shape of it had reached down through 40 years and tapped him on the shoulder. He did not know her name. He knew the type. He had been around the type once, in a different war, and the type did not change. He leaned to his wife and said something quiet. Then he kept his eyes on the woman in the gray jacket and did not look away. Off to the side, the recruit she had brought back was Toby Renfro. He was 19 and 3 weeks, from a town she would later learn was 40 miles from her own. He tried to say, "Thank you." He got 2 words out before Brackett spun on him and ate him alive for breaking position. His voice was like a door slamming, and the boy locked back up, rigid and afraid. The woman caught Renfro's eye for half a second and gave him the smallest nod. "Stand fast. You are all right." It went into the kid like a splint. He steadied. The guard jogged up from post 1. He was young, just 18. He was unsure why a senior drill instructor needed a rifle-armed escort for a woman in running shoes. But a staff sergeant was telling him to, so he came. Here is the thing about watching someone in charge. Mistake. Quiet for weakness. If it has ever happened in front of you, a person dismissed because they did not shout back, written off because they kept their hands still, then. You already know how this kind of morning ends. Stay on this deck with her. The guard reached for her elbow. She let him take it. No resistance at all. The guard's grip was apologetic. He came off to the shacks. He walked her toward the shack at the edge of the lot, the way you walk a person you have already half decided you were wrong about. Brackett followed because Brackett wanted to watch the paperwork happen. At the guard shack, he dictated the morning into a form. Unknown civilian female, approximately in her 40s. He told the young guard, leaning over the counter, wandered onto the parade deck during graduation formation, put hands on a recruit, refused lawful orders to depart. Note that she was uncooperative and evasive. The guard wrote it because a senior drill instructor was saying it, and at 18, the difference between a senior drill instructor and the truth is not yet clear. The woman stood still through all of it, the watch face turned in against her wrist. From where she stood, she could read the form upside down as it filled. She watched her own morning sheets being rewritten into a security incident in a teenager's careful block letters. She gave them only what was true and as little of it as the truth allowed. Name is Whitaker. First name, ma'am. Reporting to the depot, she said. That is the part that matters. She would not explain herself. She would not perform her innocence. And cheats. She had learned a long time ago that the people who talk their way out of a thing are usually the people who did it, and she had no intention of sounding like them. Brackett had read the silence as guilt and leaned harder. The young guard's pen slowed. He was 18 and 3 months out of his own boot camp, and some quiet instrument in him had started to register that the woman across the counter was not behaving like any trespasser he had been trained to expect. Trespassers argued. Trespassers got loud, or got scared, or got slippery. This woman answered in pieces the size of coins. She watched the form fill, with the patience of someone reading a weather report. She had corrected nothing. She had pleaded nothing. She had simply let a senior drill instructor stack sentence after sentence on top of her. The stacking had begun very faintly to feel less like an arrest, and more like a hole a man was digging while someone calmly held his coat. I want to trespass, Bar, Brackett told the guard, and get the provost marshal on the phone. I want her off this installation before the ceremony steps off. This deck is going to be clean when those Marines graduate. Spotless. He was savoring it now, rolling the words. He had built an entire file in the space of 20 minutes. He was building a file. He did not yet understand whose file he was building, or that when it was finished, it would have his own name on the cover. A shadow filled the shack door. Master Gunnery Sergeant Vales, breathing a little hard from crossing the lot fast. He had seen the stand. He had seen the hands on the recruit. He had seen the dagger, and the longer he stood with all three of those things, the colder he got. Slow down, Vales said to the guard. Quiet and even. Do not bar anybody. Do not call anybody. Verify the name first. You hear me? Verify it before one more word goes on that form. Brackett rounded on him. With respect, Master Guns, I have got this. I called it. I own it. She is a trespasser, and she is leaving. Brackett, I own it. Vales held his eyes a moment with his jaw working. Then he looked at the woman who looked back at him with an expression he could not read. A calm that scared him more than panic would have. The young guard, meanwhile, had typed the name into the terminal to start the trespass paperwork. Whitaker. The system thought about it. Then the screen changed. The guard stopped typing. He read it once. He read it again slower. His eyes, the concrete in sheets. His eyes came up off the monitor and found the woman in the gray jacket. Then his eyes went to Brackett and then went back to the screen. His mouth opened and closed, and he said nothing at all. Vale stepped back out of the shack into the sunlight and pulled the phone from his pocket. His hands were not quite steady. He scrolled to a name he had not called in 3 years. A retired team sergeant from the part of his career he did not put on his official record. He walked 20 feet from the door before he dialed, so no one could hear. The man picked up on the second ring. Vales did not waste time. "It is Desmond. I need you to tell me I am wrong about something." He kept his voice low and his back to the shack. "I have got a woman on my depot. Civilian clothes. In her 40s, reading like a lost parent. Except she carries herself like she still has a kid on her back. And she put a heat casualty down and ran him like a corpsman, lawn, without blinking. And there is a dagger on her right forearm, faded old team number under it. Tell me it is Parlor Inc." There was a silence on the line, a long one, the kind of silence that is itself an answer. "Describe the dagger," the man said. Vales did. The pommel, the blade, and the number he had only half seen. He described the stand, the stillness, and the economy, the way the deck had bent toward her without knowing why. The man on the phone exhaled slowly. "Desmond, you listen to me." His voice had changed. "Years back before your time over there, a compound got overrun in Hellmand, a tunnel nobody mapped. Team leader killed in the first 30 seconds, pushing his guys to cover, 2 wounded pinned in the open, and there was a Marine attached to that element. A sergeant, a woman who crossed that courtyard twice under fire and carried both of them out, one at a time. She took shrapnel doing it. Then she called the exfil in a voice so flat the air crew thought it was a training run. A pause. They pinned a call sign on her. The men she carried did the pinning. If that ink is real and it is her, then what you have got standing on your parade deck is Kestrel." Vales closed his eyes. "And you do not." The man went on hard. "Now, let some bootband staff sergeant trespass Kestrel off a United States Marine Corps deck. You do not let him put a hand on her. You walk him away from her right now, while he still has a career to walk away with." Vales stood in the lot and sheets, stood in the lot a moment with the sun on the back of his neck, and let the weight of it settle. The heat came off the concrete in sheets. He had spent his whole adult life learning the difference between men who talked about the hard places and men who had been to them. Came off the concrete in sheets, and he had just been told that the woman he had watched put a recruit's boots up on her own knee had been to the hardest place there was. She had come back carrying other people, he thought. About the dagger. Came off the concrete in sheets. He thought about how she had stood there and let a staff sergeant flick her sleeve and call her ink a boardwalk toy and had not corrected him. And sheets. He understood now that the not correcting had been a kind of discipline most Marines never learned in 30 years. She was not enduring Brackett. She was outlasting him. There was a difference. And Brackett was about to learn it. In front of 300 witnesses. Vales put the phone in his pocket and turned back toward the shack, and, through the window, came off the concrete in sheets. He could see that Brackett had already gotten bored of waiting for the system. Brackett was staging something, gesturing at the deck, at the formation, and at the timing. Brackett. Brackett had decided that the cleanest version of this morning was the one where he personally removed her in front of everyone, right as the ceremony stepped off, so the whole installation could see whose deck it was. He was not just rude. Vales understood that fully now. He was a man who would build a false record and stage a public humiliation to protect a kingdom. The size of one parade deck. The paperwork in the shack was a lie. With a recruit's near collapse turned into her crime, the escort was theater. Everything about the morning had been arranged to feed one man's need to be the hardest thing on the field. Inside the shack, The woman watched Vale's move with new purpose. She read all of it off him, the way she read everything. At a glance and complete. She knew exactly who he had called, and exactly what he had been told. She knew the screen behind the young guard had her flagged. She knew she could end the entire thing with one sentence, one credential, and one word said in the right voice. She did not say it. She could have ended it with a word. Chit again. She had spent 24 years learning that the right silence is louder than the word, and that a man building his own indictment should never be interrupted before he signs it, so she let it run. One forearm, one faded dagger, one team number, and a call sign that 3 Marines on this installation have now said out loud. The next part is the night the dagger comes from. Vales reached the deck just as Brackett raised his voice to start the formation moving. Helmand Province, 2 o'clock in the morning, in the Samp in the Normandy, 1011. She was 27 years old, and her name was Sergeant Sloane Whitaker. She was lying in the dirt against a mud wall, with 11 other people. For concrete in Bichas, there was 400 meters of open ground behind her, and no aircraft for 19 minutes. The numbers were the only things that did not lie. 11 on the assault element, 400 in the S element, 400 meters back to the trucks. 19 minutes until anything with a rotor could reach them. She had been doing the arithmetic sheets. She had been doing the arithmetic since the first shot the way she always did, because the arithmetic was a place to put the fear, so her hands stayed empty for work. She was attached to a Marine Raider task force, the kind of unit that did not appear in the news, and barely appeared on paper. The team leader was a sergeant named Micah Doyle, who had a wife in North Carolina. He had a habit of saying the same 6 Latin words before every patrol, words he had gotten off a chapel wall as a boy and never let go of. The compound went wrong in a way no plan had accounted for. There was a tunnel. Nobody had mapped it. It came up inside the wire behind the element, and the night turned inside out. The team was suddenly fighting in 2 directions in a space the size of a courtyard. And in the first 30 seconds, Micah Doyle died on his feet. He was pushing 2 of his younger Marines down behind, a feed trough where the rounds could not reach them. The last thing he did with his body was make it a wall. 2 of the element were hit and pinned in the open center of the courtyard. They were in the gap where nothing could get to them, and everything could reach them. Sloane did the math. 2 men, open ground, and 1 of her. The math did not care how she felt about it, and that was the mercy of the math. She went out the first time low and fast. She got a hand into the drag, handle on the first man's kit, and hauled him backward across the dirt into the lee of the wall. The ground around her boots came alive the whole way. She did not feel anything because she had not given herself permission to feel anything yet. She went out the second time for the second man and got him moving. She was nearly back to cover when something hit her in the shoulder, like a swung hammer, and spun her down. She got up. She got him the last 2 meters. Then she sat him against the wall and put a pressure dressing on her own shoulder. She did it with one hand and her teeth. To Keed, 'cause both of his hands were occupied staying alive. And then she keyed the radio and called the exfil. The air crew said later that the voice on the net had been so level and unhurried, it read the grid and casualty count and threat in clean-clipped pieces. 2 of them genuinely believed for a moment it was an exercise. They thought someone back at the base had cut into the frequency with a drill. It was not a drill. It was a woman with a hole in her shoulder running the radio because the radio needed running. She was the one who could still do it. What she carried out of that courtyard was not courage. She would say that later to the very few people she ever said anything to. It was arithmetic. 2 men, 2 trips. You do the math, and you do not let yourself feel any of it until it is done. And months of feet and life, and then you spend the rest of your life feeling all of it on a schedule of its own choosing, usually at 2 in the morning. The Expialsfell came in 19 minutes. Exactly when she had told the wounded men it would. She had counted it out for them in a flat voice, as a thing to hold on to in the dark. She had walked the casualty load order in her head a dozen times before the rotors ever crested the ridge. Who went first? Who held security? What got carried, and what got left? When the birds finally flared into the courtyard in a storm of grit and noise, she put her wounded on before she's herself on. She was the last living member of the element off the ground. She sat in the open door, with her legs hanging over 400 feet of Black Helman night, and felt absolutely nothing. It was on schedule the way she had taught herself. They flew Micah Doyle home in a flag-draped box to a wife in North Carolina. She had been told only that he died doing what he believed in, which was true, and not enough the way it is never enough. Sloane stood at the back of that funeral in her dress uniform. She said the 6 Latin words to herself when the rest of the chapel was silent, and she made a promise on that day. She made a promise on that day that she did not say out loud to anyone. The promises you say out loud are the ones you make to be heard making them, and this one was only for her. They gave her the silver star for it. They gave her the Purple Heart for the shoulder, and the 2 men she carried, once they could stand again, gave her the thing that mattered more than either. They pinned a call sign on her, Kestrel, and it stuck to her through every unit she ever served in after. She had the tattoo done a year later, the task force dagger and the team number underneath, and around the base of the blade. In small letters were the 6 small letters to words Micah Doyle used to say before every patrol, inked over the shrapnel, scarcer so that the worst night and the best of him lived on the same square inch of her arm. She came to the recruit depot 15 years and a lifetime later to spend the back half of her career making Marines. She had asked for it. A sergeant off the concrete in sheets, a sergeant major can choose near the end where to put what she has left. And she had chosen the place where they are built. She had carried out of that courtyard a very specific idea about what Marines were for and what it cost when they were led by the wrong hands. A man who hazed recruits for sport, who turned a parade deck into a personal kingdom, and who fabricated a record to protect his own pride. That was precisely the precisely the kind of thing she had come here to find an end. The motto under the dagger, the last words Micah Doyle ever said before the tunnel, sat in the small letters around the blade and on a sunlit parade deck. 15 years later, a staff sergeant's gloved finger was resting on that exact forearm and on that exact ink, and he had no idea what his hand was touching. Brackett ran out of patience the way men like Brackett always do, all at once and in public. The trespass bar had not come fast enough. The provost marshal had not called back. The young guard had gone strange and quiet and would not finish the form. The formation was about to step off, which meant his window to make this a spectacle was closing, so he decided to remove her himself. He crossed back to the edge of the deck, where she stood between 2 junior hats. Without a word of warning, he reached out and seized her by the right forearm, the tattooed one. He closed his glove around it hard and wrenched it up and around to march her off the field. He did this in front of 300 recruits, the filling bleachers, his junior hats, and Master Gunnery Sergeant Vales, who was 20 feet out and closing fast. She led him. That was the thing none of them would ever forget. The ones who understood it later She let him take the arm. Her weight settled. Her feet did not brace, and her shoulder did not pull. Her balance did not so much as waver, because resisting would have ended it too soon and on the wrong terms. Her eyes stayed flat and calm and fixed on his face. She gave him the arm the way you give a man enough rope. The grab dragged the cuff of her jacket all the way back to the elbow. The full tattoo came out into the direct sunlight. Not an inch of it, all of it, the dagger complete, the team number clear, the ring of small Latin letters around the blade, several heads in the front rank of the formations. The formation turned against every order they had ever been given. A recruit will obey 1,000 commands and still turn his head for the one thing his instincts tell him matters. In the bleachers, the gray-haired man in the faded unit ball cap rose slowly to his feet, one hand drifting toward his own heart, staring at the woman's arm. He had spent the last 20 minutes certain of the type and unsure of the proof. And now the proof was out in the sun. His old eyes found the dagger and the number and the ring of letters. He made a small broken sound that his wife heard and no one else did. He had carried men once too, in a green country a long time ago. He knew exactly what that ink was and exactly what it had cost to be allowed to wear it. He could not understand how the men in the campaign covers had been standing next to it all morning and seen a lost mother. She looked down at the concrete in sheets. She looked at the gloved hand clamped around her forearm. Then she looked up at Brackett's face, and for the first time all morning, she smiled. It was small and unhurried. It did not reach for anything. It was the smile of a person who had finished a piece of arithmetic some time ago. She was only now watching the other party arrive at the answer. "Wrong arm, Staff Sergeant," she said. 3 words. It was the smile of someone who had already counted every exit on that field and knew that not one of them belonged to him. Vales hit the group at a near run. Low and urgent, his voice came out as the flat command of a man who has stopped asking. "Brackett, let go of her arm right now. Hand off. Do it." But Brackett was committed to the bleachers, to the bleachers, to the watching recruits, and to the story in his own head, where he was the hardest thing on the field. He felt Vales closing, and he read it as a challenge to his ownership of the moment. Instead of letting go, he tightened his grip and yanked her a half-step forward. He wanted to show that no one, not even a master guns, told him to release a trespasser on his own deck. The line was crossed all the way now, a hand laid in anger, witnesses by the hundreds, the act in full sun. Whatever this had been 20 minutes ago, it was something with a name now. Something that had police reports and sworn statements waiting at the end of it. Behind Brackett's shoulder, at the edge of the parade deck, a dark sedan rolled to a stop. The door opened. A voice that every single Marine on that field, from the newest recruit to the oldest hat, was conditioned in their bones to obey. It crossed the asphalt in one clean word. Hands. Sergeant Major Concrete in Sheets. Sergeant Major Royce Calderon was 48 years old with 29 of them in the Corps. He was the outgoing Sergeant Major of the entire recruit depot. And when he said hands, the word did not need a second syllable. Brackett's glove came off her arm as if the forearm had gone hot. Calderon walked straight across the parade deck. He did not hurry either. He had the same economy she had. Came off Concrete in Sheets, the unhurried certainty of someone who had spent a life around people who hurried and had outlived most of them. He stopped 3 feet from the woman in the gray jacket, and then Sergeant Major Royce Calderon came to attention. His hand came up in a salute that the entire front of the formation could see. "Sergeant Major Whitaker," he said. "Kestrel, the depot has been waiting on you. Ma'am." His eyes flicked once hard at Brackett, though I had hoped to hand you a clean deck. For one full second, nobody moved. Brackett stood with his hand, still half raised where her arm had been, and his face began to come apart in stages. First confusion. The words did not fit the woman. "Sergeant Major," he said, and it came out cracked. A question. Aimed at no one because the gray jacket and the running shoes and the lost mother story he had built all morning could not hold the word Calderon had just put on her. Then disbelief. His eyes went to Calderon, standing at a salute. To Vales, whose face confirmed it. To the gray-haired man on his feet in the bleachers. To the young guard in the shack door, holding a screen bracket had never bothered to read. Then recognition, and this was the one that hollowed him out. He looked down at the dagger on her forearm, the dagger he had flicked with one finger and called Boardwalk Inc. He saw the team number, Etar, and he saw the ring of Latin around the blade, and somewhere in the back of his skull, 100 retellings clicked into place at once. The Raider mentor who had trained him as a young Marine. The story that mentor told and retold until the younger men rolled their eyes. The overrun compound, the two men carried out under fire, the flat voice on the radio, and the call sign. Kestrel. He had heard that call sign 100 times from a man he worshipped. He had just put his glove around it and called it weak. Then horror, plain and total. His hand had gripped a Silver Star recipient. His hand had wrenched the arm of the woman who was as of ceremony the senior enlisted Marine of this entire depot. His sergeant major, the top of his own chain, the one Marine on the installation he answered to, above all others. His hand opened all the way. He took a step back, and then Staff Sergeant Cole Brackett went, completely and perfectly still. The stillness of a man whose every possible next move has just been taken off the board. Vale stepped between them and took control of Brackett by the shoulder, firm and final, turning him away from her. Across the deck, the formation came to attention in a single rolling crack of 300 bodies, hats, and recruits, like. The word had moved through the ranks the way fire moved through dry grass. There was only one correct thing Shira marined, who in the presence of Cremine to do in the presence of what she was. Lieutenant Colonel Hugh Latimer, the battalion commander, arrived at a near run from the lot. He had seen the last 30 seconds of it through his windshield. He took it in fast. The salute, the tattoo, and the staff sergeant being turned away. He relieved Brackett of the deck on the spot. 3 quiet words that ended a man's morning and very likely his career. Calderon lowered his salute and held out his hand instead. The 2 sergeants major shook the way 2 people shake who have walked the same kind of ground in different years. "I have held this deck warm for you for 30 days, Calderon said low, just between them. "I am sorry the Welcome came wearing that." He tipped his head at Brackett's retreating back. "Duh." Sloane looked at him and at the formation standing at rigid attention in the sun. She looked at the empty place at the edge of the deck where she had been a trespasser 90 seconds ago. "He is not the Welcome," she said. "They are." And she meant the 300. Sloane reached up and rolled her own sleeve back down over the dagger. Calm and unbothered, covering the arm herself now that it had done its work. She did not say a single word to Brackett. She did not need him diminished. She had carried 2 men across an open courtyard. She had no interest in standing over one small man on an asphalt deck. Instead, she turned and she spoke to the recruits. "The Marine who was on the ground beside you all morning," she said, and her voice carried without rising, clipped and level and certain. The same voice that had run a radio in Helm and was watching how you were led. Remember it. What you just saw is not how Marines are made. You will meet it again out there. Be the ones who do not become it. No raised voice, no flourish, stillness and economy, and the weight of a person who meant every word. Brackett was walked off his own parade deck by Master Gunnery Sergeant Vales, escorted away in front of everyone. The exact thing he had tried to do to her an hour before. His path took him past recruit Toby Renfro, who had been screamed rigid that morning for the crime of saying thank you. The boy was standing a full inch taller now, with eyes front. He did not so much as glance at the man being led away. The morning's incident did what mornings like it always do once a thread is finally pulled. It unraveled. With Calderon and Latimer now really looking at Staff Sergeant Brackett's drill field, the recruits started to talk. And once recruits start to talk, the rest comes fast. There were the off-the-log sessions. The incentive training he had run past every regulation and never written down. The sick call slips he had torn up. Pray me to profess. The way certain recruits learned to stop reporting injuries, because reporting them was worse than carrying them. And sitting right on top of it all, the fabricated guard shack report from that very morning, in which a near collapse he had ignored became a crime he had invented and pinned on the woman who prevented it. The heat pulled from the drill field that afternoon. He was pulled to the drill field that afternoon and placed under investigation. And the false record he had dictated, lifted in front an 18-year-old, became the first clean exhibit against him in his own words. It was written in a teenager's careful block letters. The thing about a fabricated report is that it is a photograph of the man who wrote it. Every lie in it pointed back at the liar. He had written that she put hands on a recruit. 30 witnesses, including the recruit, would say she had saved one. He had written that she refused lawful orders. The only unlawful thing on that deck had been his own glove. He had built a case exactly as Vales had thought in the morning, and the name on the cover was his. The gray-haired man from the bleachers found her before he left. He came down out of the stand slowly, his grandson trailing behind him in a brand-new uniform, and he stopped in front of Sloan. He did not salute because he was a civilian now and had been for 40 years. The heat came off the concrete in sheets, but he took off the faded ball cap and held it against his chest. He said only that he had carried men once in a place she would have read about. He had spent the morning watching the Corps. Failed to be see in Corps PC so her, and he began to be glad or he went to have watched it finally see. She shook his hand. She told him his grandson had good hands and a steady spine. The old man wept a little, the unembarrassed way, the very old weep. And then he put his cap back on and went. The junior hat, who had laughed the loudest in the morning, the one who had concrete in sheets, the one who had snorted at about soft civilians, was the first to come forward in the afternoon. He found Vales and told the truth about everything he had watched, and said nothing about for months. His voice shook the whole way through it. Vales did not bury him for the month. The moss of silence, he looked at the young hat for a long moment and saw what Sloan had seen in the recruit. She steadied someone not yet finished. Someone who could still be made into the right thing. You start over today, Vales told him. You become the drill instructor that one was not. That is how you pay for the laugh, not in guilt. You pay in Marines. It was a small turn. It was a real one. Here as came off the concrete in sheets. What staged after the paperwork and the investigation and the change of appointment the next morning. Came off the concrete in sheets. The morning where Sergeant Major Sloan Whitaker took the depot in dress uniform with the deck full and clean. The woman they called too weak in sheets. The woman they called too weak to be there is the one who will spend the next 2 years standing on that deck making Marines, deciding what gets tolerated on it and what does not. The quiet ones are not the soft ones. They are usually the ones who already did the hard thing a long time ago in a place with no bleachers. Hours later, the ceremony done. The family's gone. The buses pulled out. Sloane stood at the edge of an empty parade deck in her service uniform. With her sleeves buttoned down over the Dagger, Toby Renfro found her there. A Marine now, 4 hours into it. His new rank crisp on his collar. He came to say thank you properly, the way Brackett had denied him that morning. She let him say it. Then she gave him the only thing she had ever found worth giving a new Marine. The rank, the medals, all of it, she said. None of it is the thing. The thing is who you are, when there is nobody with rank watching. Be right then. The rest takes care of itself. He squared away and marched off into the first day of the rest of his life. His new rank caught the late sun. The heat came off the concrete in sheets. She watched him go the whole length of the deck with something close to peace. She did not look away until he had turned the corner and was gone. Her phone buzzed against her hip. A message from a number with no name. She knew the number. She had carried him out of a courtyard once. The text was 3 words. She and 4 other living people understood. An old coded greeting that meant the work is not finished. Below it was a single photograph. A task force dagger laid across a chart table, and behind it through a hatch. The sun coming up red over open water. And below the photo was one line. Horn of Africa. When you are done making Marines. Heat came off the concrete in sheets. She looked at the dagger in the photograph and at the dagger under her sleeve. She looked at the empty deck where a man had called her weak that morning. The work was never finished. It only changed shape. For 2 years it would wear the shape of this deck and these recruits. And the slow and patient business of making them into something that would not break in a courtyard at 2 in the morning. After that, the dagger and the concrete in sheets. And the red sunrise would be waiting the way they were always waiting. She turned the phone face down against her leg. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart.